What's up, nerds? I remember for the longest time that the concept of a Toy Story 4 was a literal joke. I mean, even the Muppets joked about it in Most Wanted's Unnecessarily Extended Edition, which seemed to solidify to me the idea of it being just that, a joke. But then, one day, I'm driving past my local theater and I see this. And I'm truly at a loss for words. Needless to say, nobody wanted a Toy Story movie after 3. The idea of the story continuing without Andy as their kid, it just wasn't feasible. And I can honestly say that I was in the same camp. And I definitely wasn't happy when I learned that Toy Story 5 was coming. But we're not talking about 5 today. Now that it's been long enough, and with 5 out in the theaters at time of this being written, I feel like now is a good time to give some love to one of the most unexpected joys that Pixar has ever given me. For the 0.3 of you who aren't aware, Toy Story was Pixar's flagship brand, starting all the way back in 1995. Toy Story revolutionized 3D animation and put the Pixar team on the map, immediately stealing our hearts with the simple premise of, what if our toys were alive? Toy Story 2 was quite possibly the perfect sequel, and 3 acted as a masterclass wrap-up to a wonderful trilogy. So why the hell did they ruin it with a 4th film? Or at least, that's what all of us thought when it was announced. And the simplest answer is money. No matter how much so many people didn't want it, Pixar knew that it'd make money simply because it is Toy Story. And I did in fact watch 4 in theaters, so they clearly were right. And you know what? I went into it not terribly optimistic, and by the time I left the theater, I had a new beloved Pixar movie in my collection. Now, let's be clear, this is not a perfect film. There are some things about the movie that could have been better, but I don't want that to downplay what all it got right, to me at least. The biggest thing it did to me, and I'll elaborate more on this later in the video, is how they handled the villain, Gabby Gabby. But, like I said, I'll go more into that in a minute. Before I talk about the events of the film in more detail, I want to start by covering the more common criticisms this film receives. First off is, obviously, the unnecessary sequel. I stand by this much in that we definitely didn't need a follow-up to Toy Story 3, especially since it, to so many, uproots the ending of 3, which literally moved me to tears. But I argue that it actually doesn't uproot anything. The way I see it, Toy Story 3 is still seen as an ending, even if it's not the ending. With 5 now also being at least partially about Bonnie growing up, it's safe to say that Toy Stories 1 through 3 can be seen as the Andy arc, with 3 being the obvious ending of said arc for that story. Does that make it perfect? No. There's still plenty of holes and plenty of complaints. But it does help maintain the emotions of 3's ending without feeling like 4 takes it away. Next up is Bonnie's sudden disinterest in Woody, since she was so excited to get him at the end of 3. I think people are overestimating the attention spans of small children. When I was Bonnie's age, I'd go crazy over a new toy for a few weeks, then go a long stretch without putting much focus on it. And I have very young cousins who, when they were at that age, would often swap whatever toy they were playing with at the time on a dime. It's not as odd as people really think it is. The next one is a bit bigger. Dumbing down Buzz. His seeming obliviousness to the idea of a conscience was enough to turn most people off the film on its own. I do get what they're saying, but in my view, it doesn't come across like that. At least, not to the extent people are saying. I mean, think of it. The most of Buzz's character development in the first 3 movies is more factual than anything else. In the first movie, we see him have an existential crisis over the concept of being a toy and having to accept and embrace that he's not who or what he's marketed as. In the second movie, he's mostly just emphasizing what he learned in the first movie to the toy that taught him about it. As for Toy Story 3, he didn't actually have any particular development, unless you count Spanish mode, which Jesse probably does, but I digress. The point is, all Buzz developed is more about being a toy than something more human like a conscience. Now, that's not to say that these toys can't have them. Safe to say that Toy Story 3 proves that they do in fact have them, but I don't think Buzz is consciously aware of it. He doesn't stick by the main cast when confronting Lotso out of conscience, but rather because it just feels like what's right to him. Same for wanting to get Woody back in Toy Story 2. He's aware of the concept, but has never properly had a name to attach to it. So, with that in mind, it makes sense that Buzz would be confused about it when Woody addresses it directly from within himself. And besides, don't tell me you didn't laugh at all the times Buzz listened to his inner voice throughout the film. That was funny, and you know it. It blows his flying scene in the first film out of the water in terms of cosmic coincidences. I won't harp on this one nearly as much. Bo Peep's radical character change. Bo spent a long time away from Woody and the gang, literal decades, and we see in the flashback that even back then, Bo had a different outlook on kids than Woody does, at least initially. With how long she's been gone, it's hardly a surprise that she's gone through some big changes. Besides, in the first two films, she is nothing more than Woody's girlfriend. She didn't really have a character beyond believing him when the toys in Andy's room see Woody from Sid's window. Another complaint is how the movie is crowded with new characters. To which I have to ask, do these guys not count as new characters from 3? Or how about these new characters from 2? My point is, every movie introduces new characters. In my opinion, it's part of their charm. If they didn't add new characters, we'd never have toys like Jessie, Bullseye, and Trixie, all of whom I consider to be very likable characters. There's a few others, but it'll be easier to talk about them as they become relevant in the movie's events. Speaking of which, I know better than to think I can get away with using scenes from this film. I'll try and add screenshots where I can, but for the most part, I'll have to compensate with video game footage from the Toy Story video games and Kingdom Hearts 3, so bear with me. The film starts with a flashback sequence that we heard get referenced in the third movie, which was when Bo Peep was taken away from Andy's home. Bo mentions to Woody that toys get lost all the time and offers him to go with her. His devotion to Andy keeps him from accepting, but you can feel that this is something that'll come into play later. We cut to present day with all the toys in the closet and Woody working to keep his gang calm. When Bonnie comes to pick what toys she wants to play with, she picks everyone from the previous film except Woody. Apparently this is far from the first time it's happened, and you can tell it's getting to him. Going against Dolly's orders, he stows away in Bonnie's backpack to help her with her first day of kindergarten. When no one is looking, he tosses her the necessary craft materials that eventually becomes Forky. As far as how and why Forky is able to be alive, I'm going to actually point to this video by the Super Carlin Brothers, talking about how the movie fits into the Pixar theory. I'll leave the explanation of the theory to Ben if you don't already know, but the gist is human emotions / memory giving Forky the ability to be alive. A link to the Carlin Brothers video will be in the description below. The movie then puts us in a sequence that allows Woody and Forky having a heart-to-heart that reminds me of when Woody was explaining being a toy to Buzz at the end of the first movie. He manages to get through to Forky, and they stumble onto an old antique shop where Woody notices Bo's lamp. Hoping to find her, he goes in and encounters Gabby Gabby. Now, Gabby confused me when I first saw her, because she made herself very clearly the antagonist. Let me explain. Look at the previous two antagonists of the Toy Story films, Stinky Pete and Lotso. They don't introduce themselves in a way that makes you think they're the enemy. Stinky Pete helps Woody adjust and learn more about the kind of toy he is, and Lotso offers the gang asylum after they feel betrayed and abandoned by Andy. It isn't until later into their respective films that their darker intentions are revealed. But Gabby makes her antagonistic status obvious from the get-go. It was more jarring than the Goosebumps references that she has as minions. She wants Woody's voice box since hers is defective. In Gabby's mind, it's the only reason the kid she wants to be chosen by wouldn't want her. Woody makes his escape but fails to get Forky away from her. It's now when we get reintroduced to Bo Peep and her new persona, and I actually really like what they did with her. Like I said, Bo didn't really have anything to herself before this movie as far as depth goes, so it's refreshing to see her be more of a full character. We also get introduced to Duke Kaboom, and I will not waste much time on him. He's a stunt toy with the PTSD from his kid. That's the extent of it. Meanwhile, Buzz is trying to find Woody and Forky and runs into these two. I think their names are Ducky and Bunny? I don't know. They remind me a lot of Bulk and Skull, added to the cast for comedic effect, which they definitely pull off really well, but it takes more than that to win me over. They're good characters, just not very deep ones. It's at this point where the plot goes into full swing. After the obligatory fight between Woody and his friends that leaves him isolated, because if you pay attention, this is something that happens in every Toy Story movie, Woody confronts Gabby and offers a trade. His voice box for Forky. Gabby agrees and they go through with the operation. For Woody's part, this means he doesn't have his pull string anymore, but as far as him as a character, nothing's really lost. Gabby, with her now working voice box, plants herself in front of the kid she wants and is sadly rejected by the kid. This is the part I was talking about with Gabby earlier in the movie. She's defeated, she's at her lowest. She even offers to give Woody back his voice box. The Woody from before this movie would have taken it back and left her, but this Woody knows what it's like, to be forgotten about and left behind. It happened earlier in this very movie with Bonnie. So instead, he convinces Bo to help him get her to Bonnie, thinking that she'd love Gabby. Along the way, Gabby sees a little girl crying alone in the middle of a carnival. She goes over to her and lets herself be found. The girl picks up Gabby and is soon found by a policewoman who gets her back to her parents. And just like that, Gabby is now a toy that's being loved by a kid. And I like to think that that's kind of what the movie is trying to tell us. Toys get outgrown, it can't be helped. We get older, we stop playing with them, we get rid of them. But when one person's done with a toy, another person could still love that same toy. The first 3 movies were about the cast's loyalty to Andy, and it worked great. But now Andy's out of the picture, the fact that Woody struggles the whole film to come to terms with. Andy wasn't just a kid, he was his kid. And now that Andy doesn't need him anymore, he feels lost. But by the time the movie's over, when he chooses to stay behind with Bo, Buzz says it himself. He's not lost. Not anymore. And he's right. Woody found his new calling when he helped Forky and Gabby, helping toys find kids that loved them. It's not the fate any of us expected of our favorite cowboy, but I think it's the fate he needed. Happy trails, partner. Happy trails. This movie had a huge disadvantage when it came out, simply because of the fact that it was an inclusion that nobody wanted. Like another upcoming movie I'm less than happy about. But, in spite of that, Pixar, quite simply, did it again. They made a genuine and compelling story that honestly got through to me. I can easily rate this movie an 8 out of 10. It does hyperfixate on Woody, leaving most of the cast to be relegated to a B plot that honestly isn't even all that interesting, which is unfortunate, and there are moments where Ducky, Bunny, and Kaboom kinda overstay their welcome, but it's hard to hold those details against a movie that outshined every expectation. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Check out my buddy Tyler Crux. He does a lot of fun stuff on his channel, like this video. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. We collab all the time. I'll catch you later, nerds.